Number 1. The Promachoteuthis human teeth squid. Somewhere in a sealed jar at a research collection sits an animal barely the length of your thumb, and when you look at its mouth, something is wrong. Rows of pale ridges line the opening, curved and even, and they look, unmistakably, like human teeth. This is Promachoteuthis sulcus, and the unsettling truth is that almost no one has ever seen it. There is no film of it swimming, no photograph of it alive. There is one specimen, and that is all. The squid was formally described in the year 2007 by the cephalopod researchers Richard Young and Michael Vecchioni. The single known individual had been hauled up from the South Atlantic near the remote islands of Tristan da Cunha and Gough by the German research vessel Walter Herwig. It came from a depth between roughly 1,750 and 2,000 meters, in the cold blackness of the open midwater. The body was tiny. The mantle measured only about 25 millimeters, which is close to a single inch. Here's where the horror dissolves into biology. Squid do not have teeth. They have a hard, parrot-like beak made of chitin. What you are seeing is the buccal membrane, the ring of soft tissue that surrounds the beak, and in this preserved specimen, those folds contracted and hardened into something that mimics a human smile. In life, that membrane simply helps guide prey toward the beak. The resemblance is a coincidence of death and preservation, nothing more. Consider how little we actually have. The specimen was a single young female, so the full adult form remains unknown. Related species exist, like Promachoteuthis megaptera and Promachoteuthis sloani, the latter named for the Sloan Foundation, but the whole genus is known from only a handful of fragile individuals, most of them mangled by the very nets that caught them. The species name sulcus is Latin for a groove or furrow, describing a structural feature of the body, and the genus name translates roughly as fighting squid or frontline squid. These animals live in the mesopelagic and bathypelagic midwater, the open black column far from any seafloor, and they are so delicate that an intact example is almost a miracle. The Smithsonian, where Vecchioni works, holds reference material, yet the living animal has never been observed in its natural world. 3 ways to read this. The mainstream view is plain. The teeth are an artifact of preservation. The collection view says the squid is simply a casualty of how little of the midwater we sample. And the fringe view, the one that spreads online, insists this is a monster someone tried to hide. The real reason you have never seen it move is stranger and quieter, and we will return to it. Because the next animal does not have a face at all. Number 2, the Faceless Cusk. Imagine pulling a net up from 4,000 meters and finding a pale, swollen fish whose head is blank. No visible eyes. No obvious mouth at the front. Just a smooth, featureless dome where a face should be. The crew that found it in 2017 called it the Faceless Fish, and for good reason. From the front, it looks like something unfinished, an animal the ocean forgot to complete. The creature is Typhlonus nasus, a deep-sea cusk eel. It is not new to science. It was first described all the way back in 1878 by Albert Günther, working from specimens collected during the legendary voyage of HMS Challenger, the expedition that essentially founded the science of oceanography. Then it more or less vanished from the record. For about 140 years, no one in Australian waters had laid hands on one. That changed when the research vessel Investigator ran a survey of Australia's eastern abyss. The voyage was led by Museums Victoria with the chief scientist Tim O'Hara overseeing a haul that pulled hundreds of deep-sea species into the light, many of them new or barely known. Among them, dragged up from around 4,000 meters off New South Wales, was the faceless fish. Look closer and the blankness has an explanation. The eyes are still there, but they are reduced and buried beneath translucent skin. Because in a world with no sunlight, eyes are an expensive luxury. The mouth sits underneath the head, pointing down toward the seafloor, which tells you it feeds on bottom-dwelling invertebrates. There are even nostrils on the snout. The Latin name nasus means nose. So on careful inspection, it is not truly faceless. It simply wears its features where you do not expect them. The fish grows to about 40 centimeters and ranges across the Indo-Pacific at depths from roughly 3,200 to 5,500 meters. Its body is pale and gelatinous, built for crushing pressure and near freezing cold. 3 interpretations again. The mainstream reading is a textbook Lazarus story, a species rediscovered when better gear finally reached its depth. The historical reading is even simpler that no one had trawled that particular abyss for a century. The fringe reading treats the rediscovery as something deliberately buried. The animal itself is honest about what it is. But the next creature was only ever filmed alive by accident. Number 3, the Pointy-Nosed blue Chimaera. In 2016, scientists released footage that should not have existed. It showed a ghostly blue-gray fish with a long pointed snout and a large dark eye gliding low over a deep rocky slope. Its skin was smooth and marked with faint lines that traced across its face like stitching. This was the first time anyone had captured living video of a chimera believed to be this species, a fish whose lineage split away from sharks roughly 400 million years ago. The animal is Hydrolagus trolli, the pointy-nosed blue chimera, named in 2002 after the artist Ray Troll. Chimeras go by many uneasy nicknames: ghost sharks, ratfish, spookfish. They are cartilaginous like sharks and rays, but they are an ancient and separate branch, and they look the part. Here's the detail that fits this video so well. The footage was not shot by biologists hunting for this fish. It was recorded years earlier, around 2009, by remotely operated vehicles surveying the seafloor for geology off California and Hawaii. The clip sat in an archive until someone recognized what was drifting through the frame. And what made it remarkable was geography. This species had only ever been documented in the southern hemisphere, around Australia, New Zealand, and New Caledonia. Seeing it in the northern Pacific at roughly 2,000 meters down was a genuine shock. The biology is as strange as the backstory. Instead of endless replaceable teeth, a chimera has 3 pairs of permanent grinding plates for crushing shells. It carries a venomous spine in front of its dorsal fin. It breathes through a single gill opening on each side, not the multiple slits of a shark. And the males have something truly bizarre: a retractable club-shaped appendage on the forehead called a tenaculum, used to grip the female during mating. The lines across the face are sensory canal pores, part of a system that detects movement in the dark. The MBARACE eye scientist Lonnie Lundstein was among those who analyzed and shared the footage, while cautioning that identifying a species from video alone is uncertain without a physical specimen. 3 readings. The mainstream view sees a probable range extension caught by luck. The historical view marvels that a 400 million year old lineage went unfilmed until now. The fringe view reframes the years of delay as suppression. The footage came from neglect, not secrecy. And the next animal is nearly invisible by design. Number 4, the Telescope Octopus. Picture an octopus you can see straight through. Its body is like frosted glass, hanging motionless in the black midwater. And where you expect ordinary eyes, you find 2 cylinders mounted on stalks, both pointing straight up toward the surface far above. This is Amphitretus pelagicus, the telescope octopus, and it is one of the most alien animals in the sea. It was described in 1885 by Wilhelm Hoyle, once again from specimens collected by the Challenger expedition. That single voyage keeps reappearing in this story because so much of what we first learned about the deep came from those nets. The telescope octopus is nearly transparent, and that is the entire point. In the open water column, there is nowhere to hide, no rock, no sediment, no shadow. So instead of armor or color, it evolved invisibility. The tubular eyes are the strangest feature. They point upward because the only useful light in this twilight zone comes filtering down from the surface. By staring up, the octopus can catch the faint silhouette of prey or a predator passing overhead. To keep those eyes aimed correctly, the animal often hangs vertically in the water, drifting head down rather than crawling on the bottom like its shallow relatives. It lives between roughly 150 and 2,000 meters across the tropical and subtropical Pacific, Indian, and Atlantic Oceans. Its mantle is only a few centimeters long. Its arms are joined by a web so it can spread into a bell or umbrella shape. Through the clear flesh, you can see the gut and other organs, faint shapes suspended in glass. Notice what it lacks. It has no ink defense. Ink is useless in permanent darkness, so that ancient escape trick has fallen away. The upward tubular eye is such a good idea that evolution invented it more than once. The unrelated barrel eye fish, with its own upward staring eyes inside a transparent head, arrived at nearly the same solution from a completely different starting point. Because it is fragile and lives in open water, intact specimens are rare, and living footage from vehicles like those run by MBARI is precious and uncommon. Its lifespan, its reproduction, and most of its daily behavior remain almost completely undocumented. We have a name, a handful of preserved bodies, and a few fleeting clips of a glass animal drifting head down with its eyes locked on the surface, and that is very nearly the sum of human knowledge about it. 3 ways to see it. The mainstream view calls transparency and tubular eyes the optimal mid-water design. The historical view notes we have known it for 140 years, yet barely watched it behave. The fringe view simply calls it alien. Invisibility is one survival trick. The next animal disguised itself as 3 separate species. Number 5. The whalefish. For most of the 20th century, scientists believed they were looking at 3 different families of fish. One was a small, surface-dwelling larva with a long ribbon-like tail, called a tape tail. Another was a deep-living male with an enormous nose, called a big-nosed fish. The third was a large, eyeless, bright orange female with a gaping mouth, called a whalefish. They were filed in separate corners of the textbooks, unrelated. They were the same animal. The reveal came in the year 2009 when researchers including David Johnson of the Smithsonian matched their mitochondrial DNA and proved that tape-tail, big nose, and whalefish were simply the larva, the male, and the female of a single life cycle. It is one of the most astonishing corrections in the history of fish science, and it happened because the ocean disguised one creature as 3. Follow the transformation. The larva, the tap-tail, lives near the surface, trailing its streamer and feeding on tiny copepods. As it matures, it undergoes a radical metamorphosis and sinks into the deep sea, often below 1,500 meters and down past 3,500. From there, the sexes split into 2 completely different fates. The female becomes the whalefish proper, named for her cetacean-like profile. She loses any useful vision, grows loose velvety skin in deep red or orange, and develops a large mouth to keep feeding, reaching around 40 centimeters. The male takes the opposite path. After metamorphosis, he stops eating entirely. His jaws and gut degenerate. He survives on a massive liver, and he develops a greatly enlarged nasal organ, which strongly suggests he hunts for females by smell alone in the dark. The red coloration is a trick of physics. Red light never reaches these depths, so a red animal is effectively invisible. Their scales are reduced, and their lateral line, the system that senses vibration, is made of wide open canals running along the body. MBARI has filmed living whalefishes only a handful of times across decades of diving. 3 interpretations. The mainstream view is that extreme metamorphosis disguised one species as 3. The historical view notes the error stood for decades because the tools to test it did not exist. The fringe view calls it a secret life cycle the ocean concealed. A body that rebuilds itself this completely is unsettling enough. The next animal weaponizes light itself. Number 6. The Atolla alarm jellyfish. Down in the bathypelagic dark, between roughly 1,000 and 4,000 meters, drifts a deep red jellyfish that is almost impossible to see, because red appears black in the deep. But when something attacks it, this jelly does something extraordinary. It detonates. A spinning pinwheel of brilliant blue light races around the rim of its bell, a rotating wave so bright and so conspicuous that it becomes the most visible thing for a great distance. This is Atolla, a crowned jellyfish, with Atolla wyvilli, the best-known species, named after Charles Wyville Thomson, the lead scientist of the Challenger expedition. The light display has a chilling logic, and researchers call it the burglar alarm. The jelly cannot fight off its attacker, so instead it screams in light, and that scream is meant to summon something bigger. A larger predator, drawn by the flashing, may arrive and attack whatever is attacking the jelly. The Atolla survives by turning its own assailant into prey. The chemistry behind the flash is the familiar reaction of luciferin and luciferase, producing blue-green light that travels farther through seawater than any other color. The bell carries a deep groove typical of crown jellies, and one tentacle trails far longer than the rest, used to snag small crustaceans and gelatinous prey. Depending on species, the animal ranges from a couple of centimeters to more than 15 across. Now here is why this jelly matters beyond its own defense. The bioluminescence specialist Edith Witter studied that rotating alarm display closely, and she built an electronic lure to imitate it, a device nicknamed the E-Jelly. The idea was that if a flashing Atolla draws large predators, then a fake one might draw the largest predators of all out of the darkness and in front of a camera. Hold that thought, because it pays off later in this list in a way you will not forget. Atolla is common in deep-sea vehicle surveys recorded in every major ocean basin, and yet its behavior still surprises the people who study it. Experiments confirm that predators really are drawn toward the flashing light. The genus name itself nods to its shape, the ringed bell recalling an atoll, a circle of light in the black. It is worth pausing on how strange this strategy really is. An animal that has spent its whole existence being invisible can, in a single instant of danger, transform into the brightest beacon for hundreds of meters in any direction, deliberately giving away its position in order to survive. Invisibility and blinding light are not opposites for the Atolla. They are two settings on the same switch. 3 readings. The mainstream view treats the alarm as a genuine defense that recruits secondary predators. The historical view notes it has been documented since the Challenger era. The fringe view dramatizes the flash as a signal of something larger lurking. A jelly that screams in light is haunting. The next animal screams in slime. Number 7. The Pacific Hagfish. If you wanted to design the single most repulsive defense in the ocean, you would struggle to beat the hagfish. Grab one or bite it, and in a fraction of a second, the water around it turns into liters of thick, clinging gel. A single Pacific hagfish can produce enough slime to fill a bucket. That slime floods and clogs the gills of any fish foolish enough to attack, and the attacker, unable to breathe, must flee or suffocate. The hagfish kills with mucus. The animal is Eptitretus stoutii, a jawless, eel-shaped creature in an ancient lineage whose relatives reach back more than 300 million years. It has no true jaws, no real backbone, only a flexible rod called a notochord, and no paired fins. It is a living glimpse of what existed before vertebrates, as we know them, took shape. The slime itself is a marvel of disgust and engineering. It is mucus laced with thousands of tiny protein threads, each one thinner than a human hair, yet stronger than nylon. The threads unspool on contact with seawater and turn a small drop of secretion into a vast, suffocating cloud. And the hagfish has solved a problem you might not have considered. How does it avoid drowning in its own slime? It ties itself into a knot, then slides that knot down the length of its body, scraping itself clean as it goes. That same knotting trick has a darker use. The hagfish is primarily a scavenger. It burrows into the bodies of dead and dying animals on the seafloor and feeds from the inside out, using rasping plates of keratin to gouge flesh and bracing against the knot for leverage. It can even absorb nutrients directly through its skin and gills while buried in a carcass. It can survive for months without a meal. It has 4 hearts and tolerates water with very little oxygen. These animals live along the eastern Pacific from Canada to Mexico, from shallow depths down past 1,000 meters. In 2017, a truck hauling Pacific hagfish overturned on an Oregon highway and coated the road and several cars in slime, a scene that made headlines worldwide. 3 interpretations. The mainstream view sees slime and knotting as an elegant ancient system of defense and feeding. The historical view treasures the hagfish as a window into pre-jawed ancestry. The fringe view simply calls it too disgusting to show. A corpse eater is grim. The next animal holds its breath in the dark. Number 8. The Coffinfish. On the deep continental slopes between roughly 200 and 2,500 meters sits a small, baggy, balloon-shaped fish that looks like it has given up. Its skin hangs loose, its body is globular and covered in tiny spines, and it perches on the seafloor on stubby, limb-like fins. This is a coffinfish, of the genus Chaunax, a deep-sea relative of the anglerfishes sometimes called a sea toad. And it does something no textbook expected. It holds its breath. Like other anglerfishes, the coffinfish carries a built-in fishing rod, a modified dorsal spine called the elysium, tipped with a fleshy lure. In coffinfishes, that lure sits in a shallow groove on the snout and can be tucked away. The fish is an ambush predator, sitting motionless and twitching its lure to draw small fish and invertebrates close. The breath holding was documented in 2019 by the researchers Stacy Farina and Nicholas Long, who studied remotely operated vehicle footage of the fish. They noticed something strange. The coffinfish would inflate itself and then go for minutes at a time without moving its gills at all. Vertebrates are supposed to ventilate their gills more or less constantly, so a fish that simply stops holding a huge volume of seawater inside its gill chambers was a real surprise. Why would it do this? The leading ideas all point to life in a harsh, food-poor deep. Holding water may conserve energy by reducing the constant muscular cost of breathing. It may help the fish appear larger and more threatening to a would-be predator, and in patches of low oxygen water, pausing might simply be more efficient than gulping. The coffinfish can also inflate its body with seawater as a defense, swelling up like a pufferfish to look too big to swallow. There are many species in the genus, found off Australia, in the Gulf of Mexico, and across the Atlantic. And new ones are still being described as deep surveys continue. Their reddish coloration, like so many deep animals, is camouflage, where red reads as black. 3 readings. The mainstream view treats the breath holding as energy conservation in a lean environment. The historical view notes it overturned a basic assumption that fish must ventilate continuously. The fringe view sees an animal that plays dead as one that hides. A fish that stops breathing is strange. The next animal hid for a century behind nothing but its own size. Number 9. The Giant Squid. For centuries, humanity knew the giant squid existed, and for centuries we could not film it. We had the carcasses that washed ashore. We had the hard beaks recovered from the stomachs of sperm whales. We had the sucker scars ringing the hides of those whales, proof of titanic battles in the dark. What we did not have, until astonishingly recently, was a single frame of a living giant squid in its own world. The animal is Architeuthis ducks, among the largest invertebrates on Earth. Females can reach total lengths of around 12 to 13 meters, including the 2 long feeding tentacles. It carries the largest eyes of any known animal, each one up to about 27 centimeters across, the size of a dinner plate. Those enormous eyes are thought to detect the faint bioluminescent glow stirred up by an approaching sperm whale, an early warning system in the black. The breakthrough came in stages. In 2004, the Japanese scientists Tsunemi Kubodera and Kyoichi Mori captured the first still photographs of a live giant squid in its natural habitat. Then, in 2012, off Japan's Ogasawara Islands, a team including Kubodera, working with the broadcasters NHK and the Discovery Channel, finally filmed the first video of a living giant squid in the deep at a depth of around 630 meters. And here is the payoff promised earlier. The lure that helped draw the squid to the camera was the E-Jelly, Edith Witter's electronic device mimicking the spinning alarm display of the Atolla jellyfish. The flashing light that a small jelly uses to scream for help became the bait that called the kraken out of the dark. The squid that appeared was about 3 meters long, but it was missing its 2 long feeding tentacles, meaning the complete animal was far larger. The biology matches the legend. 8 arms plus 2 longer tentacles lined with tooth suckers. A central beak strong enough to slice flesh, backed by a rasping tongue-like radula. Blood that runs blue, colored by copper-based hemocyanin rather than iron. Genetic work in 2013 even suggested every giant squid on Earth may belong to a single species. In 2019, a NOAA expedition filmed a second living giant squid, this time in the Gulf of Mexico. 3 readings. The mainstream view sees an elusive real animal finally filmed with the new lure technology. The historical view traces the kraken myth back to encounters like these. The fringe view reframes the long delay as footage withheld. The biggest creature hid in plain sight. The last animal hides in the floor of the abyss itself. Number 10. The Deep-Sea Lizardfish. On the vast silent plain at the bottom of the ocean, between roughly 1,000 and 3,500 meters and deeper, a slender predator lies in wait. It is propped up on stiffened fins like a tripod, perfectly still, its mouth slightly open to reveal rows of needle-thin teeth that are partly translucent, almost glassy. This is Bathysaurus ferox, the deep-sea lizardfish, and it is one of the deepest living ambush predators among all bony fishes. The name tells the story. Bathysaurus means deep lizard, and ferox means fierce. It grows to around 50 to 65 centimeters and ranges across the Atlantic, Indian, and Pacific abyss. It belongs to the order Alopiformes, which also contains the lancet fishes and other lizard fishes, a lineage of patient, toothy hunters. Look inside that mouth and the design becomes clear. The The teeth are depressible, meaning they fold inward, and there are even teeth on the tongue. Once prey is seized, those inward curving fangs ensure it cannot back out. Anything that wanders across the abyssal plane, a fish, a crustacean, a squid, can become a meal. And on the food-poor seabed, a predator cannot afford to let a single catch escape. The deep-sea lizardfish carries one more adaptation that speaks to the loneliness of the abyss. It is a synchronous hermaphrodite, carrying both functional male and female reproductive tissue at the same time. On the abyssal plane, finding a mate is rare and difficult. By being both sexes at once, the lizardfish ensures that any chance encounter with another of its kind can produce offspring. Nothing is wasted in a place this empty. Its eyes are small, suited to a world with almost no light. Its mottled, pale brown body blends into the sediment. It was first described in the 19th century from deep trawl hauls, and even now living behavioral footage of it remains limited, glimpsed when a vehicle's lights happen to fall across the seabed. 3 readings. The mainstream view sees a suite of extreme adaptations to a habitat poor in both food and mates. The historical view notes it is long known from nets but rarely watched alive. The fringe view sensationalizes it as a glass-fanged monster. 10 animals down, and a single question now hangs over all of them. Why does so much of this footage stay buried in the first place? The honest answer is far less dramatic than a conspiracy, and far more revealing about how science actually works. Most video of the deep sea is not shot by biologists at all. It is recorded by industry, by oil and gas operations, by cable-laying crews, and by mining surveys, vehicles whose cameras run for the sake of pipelines and geology, not animals. Those recordings pile up on hard drives, thousands of hours of them, and most are never watched by anyone trained to recognize what swims past. The ghost shark you met earlier is the perfect example. Its historic footage was captured during a geology survey and sat in an archive until a biologist happened to review it and realized what was in the frame. There are almost certainly other discoveries waiting in exactly that state, already filmed, already stored, simply unseen. Then there is the problem of single specimens. An animal like the human teeth squid cannot be filmed alive because no one has found a second one to film. Fragile midwater creatures are routinely destroyed by the nets meant to collect them, arriving at the surface as torn fragments. Funding tends to reward gathering new data over the slow, unglamorous labor of cataloging what we already have. So when people say footage was buried, the truth is usually neglect and backlog rather than secrecy. The abyssal plain and the open midwater remain the least sampled environments on the planet, and a large majority of deep-sea species have never been formally described at all. There is another layer to this. Identifying a deep-sea animal from video alone is genuinely uncertain. Without a physical specimen in hand, even an expert can only say a creature is probably a given species, which is exactly the caution scientists raised about the ghost shark footage. So a clip can exist, be watched, and still not count as a confirmed record, leaving the animal in a strange limbo, seen but not officially found. The dark is not hiding these animals on purpose. We simply have not looked at most of what we have already recorded, and even when we have looked, we often cannot be certain what we saw. That gap between what is captured and what is understood is where nearly every animal on this list was lost. Step back from the individual creatures and a pattern emerges, a shared toolkit that the deep sea hands to almost everything living there. The first tool is color used as camouflage. Red light is the first wavelength absorbed by seawater, so it never reaches the deep, which means a red animal is effectively invisible. That is why the whalefish, the Atolla jelly, and the Coffinfish all wear shades of red and orange. They are not bright down there, they are black. The second tool is the opposite strategy, pure transparency, chosen by the Telescope Octopus, which cannot be colored against open water, and so becomes glass instead. The third tool is light itself, bioluminescence, used by the Atolla as an alarm and exploited by researchers to lure the giant squid. Vision splits 2 ways, where light is hopeless, eyes shrink and vanish beneath the skin, as in the Faceless Cusk, the whalefish, and the lizardfish. Where the faintest glow still matters, eyes grow enormous or turn into upward staring tubes, as in the giant squid and the Telescope Octopus. Energy is hoarded everywhere, whether by the coffinfish holding its breath or the lizardfish waiting motionless for prey. Even reproduction bends to the dark. With mates so scarce, the lizardfish carries both sexes at once, and the male whalefish abandons eating to become a swimming nose that hunts females by smell. The hagfish, meanwhile, makes its living recycling the dead, and its body chemistry is so ancient that its blood is isotonic with seawater, matching the salt of the ocean in a way few living vertebrate relatives still do. Underlying everything is the brute physics of the place, crushing pressure and near-freezing cold that every one of these animals must tolerate simply to exist. Again and again, unrelated animals arrive at the same answers, a textbook display of convergent evolution. The tubular eye of the telescope octopus and the tubular eye of the barrel-eye fish were invented separately, by a mollusk and a fish, because the problem of catching faint light from above has only a few good solutions. The deep does not reward spectacle, it rewards efficiency, and these animals are what efficiency looks like when the lights go out. There is a human thread running through every animal on this list, and it begins with a single ship. The voyage of HMS Challenger from 1872 to 1876 dragged its nets across the world's oceans and hauled up the first specimens of the Faceless Cusk, the Telescope Octopus, and the jellyfish later named for the expedition's own lead scientist, Charles Wyville Thomson. The naturalist Albert Gunther turned many of those hauls into the founding catalogs of deep-sea fish. The work continued across generations. Richard Young and Michael Vecchione spent careers making sense of rare and fragmentary squids. In 2009, G. David Johnson untangled the whalefish life cycle that had fooled science for decades. Edith Witter pioneered the use of bioluminescence as a tool, building lures from the language of light itself. Tsunemi Kubodera waited years and finally filmed the giant squid in 2012. A newer kind of explorer matters just as much. The remotely operated vehicle teams at institutions like MBARI, including researchers such as Lonnie Lundstein, turned the deep from a place we sampled with blind nets into a place we could actually watch. The voyage of the investigator in 2017, led for the Abyssal survey by Tim O'Hara of Museums Victoria, showed how much remains to be found with modern gear. What ties them together is a single habit of mind: curiosity and the patience to look again. A century-old question first asked by a sailing ship gets answered by a robot with a camera, or by one scientist willing to watch old tape until something impossible drifts into view. For all of this, the list of what we have never seen dwarfs the list of what we have. The human teeth squid has never been filmed alive, and its adult form is genuinely unknown. Most of the midwater squids that share its world are known only from damaged, net-torn specimens. The everyday behavior of the telescope octopus and the whalefish has barely been observed. For the majority of deep-sea species, we cannot tell you how they mate, how long they live, or how fast they grow. New species turn up on nearly every deep expedition. The Hadal trenches, below 6,000 meters, remain almost untouched on video. The so-called deep biosphere, the living world inside the rock of the seafloor itself, is barely sampled at all. No one can say how many single specimen species are sitting in jars right now, waiting decades or centuries for a second sighting that may confirm what they truly are. And there is a clock running. Climate change is altering the chemistry and temperature of the deep before we have documented even a fraction of what lives there. The gap between what has been collected and what has been understood keeps widening, because collecting is fast and understanding is slow. The honest summary is uncomfortable but simple. We have filmed a vanishingly small sliver of the largest habitat on Earth, and we are changing it faster than we are learning it. So return to the phrase that started all of this, the idea of footage so disturbing it had to be buried. By now, the truth has a different shape. The footage was buried, in a sense, but not by anyone hiding a secret. It was buried by the sheer size of the ocean and the limits of human attention. Every animal here sat unseen or misunderstood for decades, sometimes for centuries, not because it was forbidden, but because no one had looked closely enough yet. What unsettles you about these creatures is not invention. It is real biology, honest adaptation to a world so different from ours that its solutions look like nightmares. A squid with a mouth like a smile, a fish with no face, an octopus made of glass, a jelly that screams in light, and a beast that drowns its enemies in slime. None of it was designed to frighten you. All of it was designed to survive. Every clip that finally reaches the surface stands in for thousands of hours that no one has watched. The next great discovery may already exist, sitting on an unwatched drive in a research archive, waiting for a curious person to press play. The ocean preserves and conceals in equal measure, and what brings its secrets into the light is never fear. It is curiosity. The dark down there is not empty. It is only unwatched. And as long as that is true, the abyss will keep holding its remaining secrets, patient and cold, waiting for the rest of us to look down and keep looking.